Rancher lived alone for years, until the Bigfoot laid a bride in white on his porch. For years, Elias Carter lived alone in his cabin, the only light in a valley of snow and silence. But one winter night, he followed tracks too large for any man, leading back to his own porch. There, beneath the moonlight, a giant shadow emerged from the mist. Bigfoot, in its arms, a woman in white. She collapsed on Elias's doorstep, breathless, whispering, "Help me." Elias raised his rifle, torn between fear and instinct. Yet something in him held back. The creature did not attack. It only left her there alive and vanished into the forest fog. That night, Elias whispered words he'd never thought he'd believe. Not every shadow means harm. Some legends destroy, but some are keepers of the woods. The winter silence of Montana. At the close of the 19th century, the Montana Valley lay buried beneath snow so cold and vast that every sound seemed swallowed whole. In the midst of that frozen wilderness, only a single cabin still glowed with light. Its owner was Elias Carter, an aging rancher who had lived in solitude for many years, carrying the emptiness left by the loss of his wife, a hollow nothing could ever fill. His life had been given to the cattle, to the harsh winters, and to the silence of the mountains. That night, as on so many before, Elias sat by the fire, his weathered hands slowly whittling a piece of wood. The flames cast his shadow across the cabin wall, thin, unyielding, and alone. Outside, the wind swept endlessly, driving snow across the eaves. But the stillness did not last. A heavy sound rose from beyond the door, a creak wood straining under tremendous weight. Elias lifted his head, every muscle tense. He knew the cry of wolves, the rush of deer, even the battering of storms against the timber walls. But this was different, slow, deliberate, as though the steps of something immense were drawing near. He set the carving knife aside his hand, reaching for the rifle by the table. His heartbeat quickened, his ears straining against the silence. The wind outside fell quiet, leaving behind a hush so deep it pressed on his chest. And then he heard it, a breath, long, heavy, cold as the forest air. Elias rose each step across the wooden floor, sounding firm against the creeping steps outside. He drew the bar from the door, and when it opened, the night air rushed in, shaking the flames into a wild dance. Moonlight glinted across the snow, and there upon the porch lay footprints, vast, pressed so deep that at a glance Elias knew no man alive could have left such marks. He froze his hand, gripping the rifle stock. The silence that had long been his companion now lay shattered. And in that instant, Elias understood something extraordinary had begun, and this night would not be like any other in the long, lonely years behind him. Part 1: Footprints in the Storm. The next morning, Montana lay blanketed in fresh snow. A pale sun glimmered against the ground, flooding the valley with a harsh, dazzling light, beautiful yet desolate. Elias Carter pulled his thick coat close to his neck and stepped out toward the cattle shed. His old horse whinnied softly, breath steaming into the frosty air, as restless as its master. Crossing the open ground toward the pasture, Elias stopped dead in his tracks. Across the untouched white stretched a line of enormous footprints. They were deep and clear, each nearly twice the length of a man's foot, pressed in steady pairs, as though left by someone walking upright. Elias crouched, placing his calloused hand against one. The cold bit through his glove, sending a shiver up his arm. "Not a bear," he muttered. Bears left claw marks, their steps heavy but uneven. These prints were straight-measured, shaped like a man's foot, only far too large to belong to any man. He stood there for a long time, his gaze fixed on the trail leading straight into the dense pine forest. In his mind rose the voices he had long dismissed, talk of the forest keeper. Bigfoot. In the town saloon, everyone had a tale. Some swore they'd seen him, others called it a fireside myth meant to scare children. Elias had always scoffed, but now, with the prints laid out before him, laughter no longer came. He drew in a breath, telling himself it might be the work of mischievous boys from town, but his pulse quickened, blood beating at his temples. For all his reason, the instincts of a man who had lived his life in the wilderness whispered something else. He was being watched. By dusk, the sky had darkened to violet. Elias herded the cattle into their pen and turned back toward the cabin. As he stepped onto the porch, he froze. There on the snow-covered boards before his door lay something strange. It was a small piece of white cloth frayed at the edge. Elias lifted it. The fabric was soft, delicate unmistakably from a woman's garment. He frowned, turning it over in his hand. In this desolate place it had been years since he had seen any trace of a woman. A memory rose his late wife standing in a white dress on their wedding day, smiling among the wildflowers. Elias's old heart tightened, the scrap of fabric cutting deep into a wound that had never truly healed. He looked around. Only silence and snow answered him. No small footprints, no signs of a woman, only the enormous tracks pressing into the earth leading into the woods. Elias gripped the cloth, feeling as though something or someone was sending him a sign. That night by the fire, Elias could not settle. The white cloth lay upon the wooden table, the flames casting it in a glow that made it seem alive. He remembered the gravelly voice of Jeremiah, the oldest native elder in town. The keeper of the woods takes to keep balance, and sometimes he gives back. When he gives back, it is because he wants you to see. Elias's rough fingers trembled over the fabric, his heart weighted with unease. Was this a warning or a gift? And if Bigfoot had truly left it, what did he want with an old man who had only solitude to his name? The valley's silence, once a companion, now felt broken. From the moment Elias picked up the cloth, he knew great eyes were watching him in the snow. That evening, the sky grew heavy with clouds, the wind screaming through the cabin's shutters. Elias sat unmoving before the fire, staring at the white scrap as though it might speak. Flames leapt across its threads, making it gleam like a message too clear to deny. He turned it over again and again in his hands. The cloth was thin, soft, nothing a rancher or hunter would carry. It was a woman's. But why here? Why now? And why alongside the massive prints beyond his door? Elias leaned back, his hand covering his brow. In his ears came Jeremiah's old words, "The keeper of the woods does not take without reason. When he leaves a sign, it is because he wants you to see. Do not look with your eyes alone. Look with your heart." Once Elias had scoffed at such tales, but now, holding the scrap of cloth, his chest ached with doubt. The wind rose, rattling the windows. Elias sprang up, gripping his Winchester by the door. He stepped onto the porch, the cold cutting his face. Yet inside his heart felt colder still. Fresh tracks marked the new snow. The same immense footprints leading straight to his cabin and stopping there. No prints turned away. Elias's eyes searched the tree line, finding nothing but a wall of shadow. And yet he felt it. Something lingered, hidden in the mist, watching. His grip tightened on the rifle, his heartbeat racing. He had lived long with silence, but this silence pressed heavy, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. He bent, pressing his palm into one of the prints. Still cold, still fresh. Elias lifted his head, his weary eyes sharp with caution. He knew then the creature was not only leaving signs, it was testing him. Inside once more, Elias set down his rifle, his hand closing around the cloth. The firelight shimmered over it, stirring tears as memories of his wife returned. Her white dress, her gentle smile in the fields. He had buried those thoughts deep, but now the darkness outside had dragged them to the surface. "What do you want of me, Elias?" whispered his voice, hoarse eyes fixed on the frosted window. No answer came. Only wind, only falling snow. But in his heart, Elias felt it clear his solitude was over. The valley no longer belonged to him alone. Great eyes, vast and unseen, were watching every step he took. That night, Elias hardly slept. He sat by the fire with his rifle within reach, the white cloth resting on the table like a living proof. And he knew this was only the beginning of a story he could not yet imagine the end of. Part 2. The White Bride on the Porch. The moon was full that night, the sky clear and sharp. Snow reflected its silver light until the valley glowed in a dreamlike radiance. Elias Carter's cabin stood like a lone spark against the sea of white. From the window, firelight flickered outward, casting a soft glow across the snow-draped porch. Elias sat at the table, turning the white cloth over in his hands. It had become an obsession, a question with no answer. Who had left it? And why then came the sound, heavy, deliberate. Creak. The wooden porch groaned under an immense weight. Elias lifted his head body rigid. This was no wind. It could not be the wind. He reached for the Winchester by the hearth, his steps cautious as he approached the door. He listened. Beneath the silence, he heard it deep, steady breathing like wind rushing through a cavern. Slowly, Elias pulled back the latch. Cold air burst into the cabin flames, leaping in protest. He stood at the threshold, staring out into the moonlit snow. And there he saw it. A towering figure emerged from the mist, larger than any man Elias had ever known. Thick, dark hair draped over shoulders, broad as stone walls. From the shadows, 2 golden eyes gleamed. Bigfoot. Elias's heart thundered. His grip tightened on the rifle, but before he could raise it, the creature bent low. Gently, it laid a figure upon the wooden porch. Moonlight revealed her a woman in a white dress. She lay motionless, breath-shallow hair damp and tangled across her pale face. Her gown was torn and muddied, yet under the moon it shone with an eerie beauty, like a bride out of place and time. Bigfoot straightened its gaze, never leaving Elias. Yet it did not approach. Instead, it stepped back, and then back again until the mist swallowed its massive form, leaving only silence. Elias stood, frozen, wide-eyed hands trembling. Before him upon the porch lay a bride delivered to his doorstep by the very legend men had feared for generations. He knelt, touching her shoulder. She stirred, lips trembling, a faint groan escaping. Elias quickly lifted her inside, placing her near the fire. He wrapped a blanket over her frail body and pressed a cup of water to her lips, his hands unsteady. She gasped softly, drinking in small sips. Her eyes flickered open, lost at first, but slowly alive again. Elias sat across from her, still in disbelief. He whispered half to himself, "Who are you? And why would he bring you here?" The answer did not come. Yet one thing was certain from this moment on. His life of solitude had shifted onto a path from which there was no return. The fire crackled, lighting the pale face of the woman placed upon his porch. Elias sat close, his rifle within reach, eyes fixed on her, cautious, bewildered. Her gown, torn dirty but still carrying the ghost of a bride, clung to her thin frame. Elias's thoughts twisted. Was this some trick, some trap set by the creature? Or was she truly just a lost soul in need of saving? In his rough, low voice, he asked slowly, "Who are you? Why are you here?" The woman's eyes shone weakly in the firelight. Her voice cracked faint but firm. Anna Whitlock. I was with a wagon train, but I was lost. They think I'm dead." The name struck Elias. Whitlock. He had heard it in town, the missing girl whose disappearance haunted whispers for weeks, then faded into silence. No one believed she had survived. And yet here she was. And it was Bigfoot who had brought her. Anna spoke in broken words, her story carried between sobs, lost in the blizzard, wandering for days near death. In her weakness, she had collapsed. When she awoke, she found strange signs, berries, scraps of food, and a shadowed figure lingering at the edge of the trees. He didn't kill me," Anna whispered, her eyes wide with trembling fear. He shielded me. Whenever beasts drew near, I heard his roar, and they fled." Elias sat silent. Each word struck him like a hammer against doubt. Jeremiah's stories, the footprints in the snow, the white cloth all pieced together. Bigfoot was not the monster of rumor, not a thief, not a killer. He had brought her. He had returned her. Elias turned his gaze to the door beyond which the forest lay thick with fog. He felt its unseen eyes still upon him. His hands shook not from fear but from awe. Somehow the creature had chosen to place a life in his care. Anna huddled deeper into the blanket, her breath evening out. Just before sleep overtook her, she whispered soft as a prayer, "Perhaps he brought me here because he knew I would be safe with you." Elias did not answer. He only sat watching the fire dance, listening to the wind. In his heart, something shifted. The solitude he had long embraced was gone, And from this night on, his life was bound to a legend mankind was not yet ready to believe. Part 3. The Bride's Tale. Morning light filtered weakly through the frosted window, touching the cabin with a pale glow. Elias Carter sat silent by the fire, his eyes dark and weary from a sleepless night. On the small bed, Anna Whitlock curled beneath a thick blanket, her breathing steadier now, though her face was still pale. When Anna stirred awake, her gaze was uncertain. Elias handed her a bowl of steaming soup, his voice low and rough. "Eat. You'll need your strength." Her frail hands trembled as she held the bowl, sipping in small gulps. Heat returned to her cheeks, faintly coloring her hollow face. After a moment, she looked up, her voice rasping but clear. "Do you believe me that he didn't hurt me?" Elias did not answer right away. His elbows rested against the table, eyes fixed on the fire lines carved deep across his face, torn between doubt and listening. Anna drew a slow breath and began. She spoke of weeks past when she had joined a wagon train through Montana to search for her missing brother. In the blizzard, the party was separated. Anna fell behind, wandering for days, starving, exhausted. She remembered collapsing in the snow, certain death had come. But when she woke, something had changed. Beside her were berries, roots, scraps of food, and all around the massive footprints of a giant. At first, terror consumed her. She believed a beast had chosen her for its prey. Yet each night, as wolves howled near, she heard a roar roll through the forest, and the predators fled. Her voice trembled as tears gathered. "The first time I saw him, it was under the moonlight, huge, covered in hair eyes, burning gold. I thought my heart would stop. But he only stood there, set food down, then stepped back into the dark. No word, no attack, just keeping watch." Elias leaned forward, his gnarled hands gripping his bowl. Memories pressed in the white cloth on his porch, the giant footprints, Jeremiah's words. "The keeper of the woods takes to keep balance, and sometimes he gives back." And then he asked, his voice hoarse. Anna nodded, tears falling. "He followed me, but never close. When I fell and could no longer walk, he carried me, shielded me from the wind. I fought, I cried, but he never harmed me. And then, last night, he brought me here, set me down on your porch, and left." The cabin fell into stillness. Only the fire crackled, only the wind pressed through the cracks. Elias studied the girl before him, her tangled hair, her frightened yet grateful eyes. His chest rose slow and heavy. If her words were true, Bigfoot was no kidnapper, no bloodthirsty beast. He was a guardian, a silent escort who had carried a life through the storm and left it in Elias's care. In a voice barely more than a whisper, Elias said to himself, "Not every shadow carries danger." Anna lifted her eyes, lips quivering. She whispered back, "He saved me." The firelight flickered between them, touching two souls, one old and lonely, the other young and lost, who in that moment shared the same truth. Perhaps legend was not only fiction. When her tale ended, the cabin remained quiet. The flames danced their glow, falling across both faces. Neither spoke, as though waiting for the mountains themselves to answer. Elias rose and drew back the curtain. Outside, snow-glistened pines loomed black and silent as watchmen. Yet inside him stirred a strange feeling, as though unseen eyes still lingered, not in menace but in watchful care. "Do you think he'll return?" Elias asked, his voice low. Anna hesitated, then nodded faintly. "I don't know. But if he meant me harm, I wouldn't be here." Her words stilled him. He thought of the cloth upon his porch, the footprints the knife carved with JC whispered of in old stories. All of it bound together now, painting a mystery greater than he had ever believed he'd live to see. Her voice softened as she finished. "In the dark, I heard his steps following. At first, I thought I was prey. But over time, I understood. He only wanted me to survive. He isn't a monster. He's a keeper of the woods." Elias turned, his aged eyes shadowed. Part of him longed to believe her. Another part recoiled. He had lost too much to these mountains. How could he place faith in something born of myth? Yet when he looked into Anna's tear-bright eyes, he knew her gratitude was real. Her memories were true. He sat down once more and murmured, "Perhaps he brought you here because he wanted me to protect you. Or perhaps he wanted me to look at myself." Anna gazed at him, puzzled but earnest. In his eyes, she saw conflict between old fear and a fragile hope. That night, Anna drifted into sleep. Elias remained by the fire, staring into the flames. Outside, the wind roared through the forest, but within a different echo grew fragments of past, present, and legend weaving together. He remembered Jeremiah's final warning spoken years ago before the old man vanished from town. "Be careful, Carter. If the keeper of the woods has set his eyes on you, it means you've been chosen. And being chosen is not always a blessing." Elias's hand tightened around the rifle resting on the table. Yet now it felt less like a weapon, more like a relic of fear. For deep down, he knew no gun could change the truth that had stepped upon his porch. In the fading glow, Elias looked at Anna, the white bride returned by Bigfoot, and for the first time in many years, he admitted to himself he was no longer alone. Part 4. The boundary between man and legend. In the days that followed, the old cabin, once so used to silence, felt changed. Anna stayed her strength, slowly returning with hot meals and the steady warmth of the fire. She busied herself with small tasks, cooking breakfast, mending clothes, sweeping the snow from the porch. Simple things yet. They filled the cabin with a life Elias had not felt in years. He would sit on his wooden chair and watch her moving by the stove, and for a fleeting moment he saw the shadow of his wife in her place. The loneliness that had gnawed at him for so many winters softened. Yet comfort came with a hard truth. All of this change began with the very creature he had spent a lifetime fearing and denying. News of Anna's return soon reached the town. Some were astonished to hear she lived. Others spun rumors the white bride on Carter's porch, the woman delivered by the beast. They cast doubtful eyes toward Elias, muttering that he was hiding something terrible. Elias, as ever, offered no defense. He was used to being misunderstood. But when he caught the timid look in Anna's eyes, he realized his silence no longer concerned only himself. One night, as snow fell thick and the wind howled, Elias stoked the fire. Then it came again, that sound he knew too well. Wood groaning under a great weight. He strode to the porch, rifle in hand, out of old habit. But what lay upon the step was no cloth, no footprint. Resting neatly on the snow was an old hunting knife. Its blade was worn, its handle dark with age, and on it, carved into the wood, were 3 letters, J.C. Jonathan Carter, his father. Elias dropped to his knees, lifting the knife with trembling hands. The cold of the metal bit into his skin, but within a fire burned. This was the knife lost the day his father died on a hunting trip gone wrong. Elias had searched, had grieved, then surrendered it to time. And now it had returned, set before his door by the unseen hand of legend. Anna stepped out behind him, a shawl around her shoulders. When her eyes met the knife, she gasped. Who placed it here?" she whispered. Elias did not answer. His gaze lifted into the night, where through the veil of mist a massive shape lingered. Bigfoot, standing still, watching. Then slowly the creature bowed its head, a gesture at once strange and solemn, like both greeting and acknowledgement, before fading back into the forest. Elias gripped the knife, his body shaking. The night was bitter, but his face burned with shock and wonder. In his weary eyes gleamed something new, an undeniable truth. The creature knew his past. Anna's hand touched his shoulder, her voice hushed. "He saved me, just as he saved you." Elias said nothing. The wind tore across the valley, snow swirling, but within him a fragile boundary broke the line between man and legend, between fear and belief. That night, he did not sleep. He sat by the fire, the knife marked J.C. resting on the table like a lantern of memory. His rough fingers traced the worn carvings, each groove pulling him back into childhood hunting trips with his father, long evenings at the forest's edge, sunsets painted red across the sky. Anna watched him quietly. Since the night Bigfoot had returned her, she was bound to this tale an unwilling witness. From time to time she spoke softly. "Do you think? He wants to remind you of something." Elias raised his eyes deep and dark. "Perhaps. Or perhaps he only wants me to know that he knows. My past, my pain. He sees it all." The wind rattled the cabin's walls as though the wood itself breathed with his words. Anna shivered, pulling the blanket close. Yet in her heart grew not only fear, but reverence. The next morning, Elias and Anna ventured outside. The sky was clear sunlight stretching across the valley in a cold glow. They followed fresh tracks leading to the tree line. There, Elias found small things scattered: a half-carved piece of wood, an old cord. Nothing random, each placed with intent like fragments of a message. Anna whispered, wide-eyed, "It's as if he's building a bridge between us and him." Elias said nothing, but in his heart, he knew once a message is given, it cannot be ignored. This was no longer about belief, it was about acceptance. That night, Elias sat by the window, cracked open to the winter air. He waited, and in the stillness he saw it again, a dark giant moving through the mist. It did not come close, but neither did it vanish. It lingered silent like a sentinel at the forest gate. Elias did not lift his rifle. His hand only rested on the knife eyes locked on the shape beyond. And in that moment, old fear receded. He understood, had the creature wished him harm, he would not still be here. Its presence was not death, but remembrance. Anna's voice came softly behind him. "Not every shadow carries danger." Elias nodded. A boundary had blurred between legend and life, monster and keeper, loneliness and connection. In the dimming firelight, his heart, long captive to grief, found its first release. And he knew no matter how dark the forest remained, there was a quiet light within it, watching, protecting. Part 5. The Keeper of the Woods. The snow began to melt. From the deep furrows of the valley, thin ribbons of water seeped out, threading into a narrow stream that wound through the grasslands. The sky grew bluer, and the first warm rays after a long winter fell across Elias's wooden cabin. Anna stood on the porch and drew a long breath. Her brown hair lifted in the spring breeze. Watching from the doorway, Elias felt something ease inside him. It had been a long time since laughter lived in his home, but now each time Anna smiled, it felt like a small wind sweeping the darkness out of him. One morning, Elias decided to take Anna back to town. They saddled the old horse, packed a few things, and set off. After winter, the Montana town seemed to wake up people, busier streets alive with voices. When Elias led Anna into the cafe, every eye turned toward them. "That's her, Anna Whitlock," someone whispered. "The girl missing for months." "She's back," another murmured. But the next words were sharp with suspicion. Was she really saved by Carter, or is he hiding something out in those woods? Anna lowered her head, her hands trembling. Elias set his rough palm on her shoulder and swept the room with a steady gaze. No one asked further. He knew the truth of Bigfoot wasn't something he could speak aloud. People would mock, or worse, they would pour into the forest guns, ready shattering a delicate balance. After a day's rest, Elias brought Anna back to the cabin. For all the bustle of town, her heart felt uneasy, as if she belonged not to the noise, but to the quiet wooden house. On the ride home, passing through the trees, Anna whispered, "He's still watching us. I can feel it." Elias nodded. He felt it too, the presence of great eyes, not near, not far, just close enough to remind them they were never truly alone. That evening, when they returned, Elias stepped onto the porch and stopped. In the damp earth where the snow had melted, a fresh trail of giant footprints ran to the forest's edge. New, clear, laid down that very day. He said nothing. He went inside, gathered a small food pouch, some bread, a bit of jerky, and the knife carved with JC. He walked to the big stone at the tree line and set them there. Anna followed, eyes wide. "Why are you doing that?" "To give thanks." Elias answered, his voice low as the wind. "Not only for you, but for all he's kept safe. There are some debts you can't repay with a gun, only with gratitude." They stood together, looking into the woods. Evening mist gathered among the boughs, and a shape moved faintly in the haze. Elias did not go closer, nor did he wait. He simply bowed his head, a quiet ritual. In that moment he understood between him and the creature, a wordless pact had taken shape. The next morning Elias rose early. Sunlight slipped through the cracks and touched the cabin dimly. He stepped onto the porch and scanned the yard with practiced eyes. The stone was bare, the food and the knife were gone. Nothing remained but the great tracks leading deeper into the forest, fading into the mist. Elias wasn't surprised. He stood still, hands resting on the rail. Peace swelled in him, a kind he had not felt in years. Not because the darkness was gone, but because a different kind of darkness was near, quiet, watchful, and kind. Anna came out wrapped in a shawl, her gaze following the trail. "He took it," she said softly. "And he knows." Elias nodded. Words weren't needed. The gesture was enough to admit a truth: the invisible bond between man and legend had tightened. Days passed. Snow vanished more quickly, and the stream sang around the meadow. Elias and Anna settled into their rhythm, tending the cattle, mending the roof, lighting the fire each night. Bigfoot did not appear again, but signs remained, branches laid in strange patterns, a deep roar far off that sent wolves scattering, and sometimes small bits of food left by the forest's edge. One evening, as the sun bled red behind the mountains, Elias and Anna stood on the porch, eyes turned toward the trees. Through the drifting veil of mist, Elias glimpsed a giant silhouette moving slowly. Not clear enough for proof, but clear enough for him. The figure paused and turned toward the cabin. Elias felt the golden gaze find him across the distance through the haze. No word, no gesture, only presence. Then slowly the shape slipped back into the trees. Anna tightened her grip on Elias's hand and whispered, "Maybe he was never truly alone, just like you." Her words sank deep. In Elias's weathered heart, a new belief stirred. He understood that his solitude had not been only emptiness, it was the quiet where the rarest connections are seen. That night before sleep, Elias wrote a few simple lines in his old notebook. They call him a monster. But to me, he is the keeper of the woods, and I owe him this truth. He closed the book and pinched out the candle. Outside, the night wind traveled through the pines, carrying a far, steady sound. Not threatening, not fierce like the long breath of a silent gatekeeper. Dusk stretched over the valley, painting the sky in bright red and fading gold. Elias Carter's cabin glowed warm, a small lighthouse in a sea of mist. Anna Whitlock stood on the porch wearing the cloak Elias had given her. In her eyes wavered a gentle hesitation. She had found a measure of peace, yet a wide world still waited. She turned to Elias and said softly, "I have to go back, Elias, but I'll return. I promise." He looked at her a long moment, his eyes layered with regret, protectiveness, and gratitude. He nodded and set his rough hand on her shoulder in a quiet farewell. The town's wagon carried Anna away, wheels humming along the misted trail. Elias stood on the porch until her figure vanished behind the trees. What he felt was not emptiness, but a tender faith that she would return as her eyes had promised. Back inside, the knife marked JC lay upon the table, its blade catching the fire's flicker. Elias picked it up and held it fast. His hand trembled not from weakness, but from the weight of a past turning into strength for the present. He stepped onto the porch once more and lifted his gaze to the darkening ridges. In the hush, he whispered, his voice like a prayer. "Not every shadow means harm." The pines answered with a soft, far rustle. Elias stood still and let the cold wrap around him, warmth blooming steady in his chest. His story did not close on fear, nor on the tavern gossip of drunks. It closed on belief that some legends do not come to destroy, but to remind us of kindness and connection. In the Wild West, where bullets and blood so often have the final say, Elias Carter learned another lesson. Sometimes the darkness is not the enemy. Sometimes it is the keeper, silent, steadfast, guarding life without asking for any recognition. He went back inside and shut the door. The lamplight flared warm and sure. He might be alone in the cabin, but he no longer felt lonely. Somewhere out in the mist, he knew a giant presence kept watch quiet as the fate of this land itself. Message: in the Wild West, some shadows do not destroy. They remind us of kindness and connection. If you were Elias, would you open the door that night? Share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe, and stay for the next tale where legend and the Old West meet.